Welcome, everybody, to the Capitalist Corner. I'm Michael Liebowitz, and hopefully, Mark will show up soon. He's a very busy guy, but I'll get us started off today. So, one of the things that's really been driving me crazy. There he is. All right, Mark, I got you. We're live.
Oh, hold on. Let me get my dog.
You go get your dog. So one of the things that's been really driving me crazy ever since the arrival of Donald Trump on the scene is the manner in which the conservatives have fallen into line. And I mean, I remember listening to Rush Limbaugh. Now, Rush Limbaugh has been a pro free trade guy, or had been a pro free trade guy for decades. Sean Hannity as well. And how quickly they came around to, if not all out endorsing Trump's stance on trade, to just accepting it as okay. Glenn Beck was another one who used to criticize Trump on free trade, actually called him, made him analogous to Hitler back in the, early stages of Trump's campaign, and now he's come along. And on and on and on with these so-called conservatives who have now joined the anti-free trade movement. And yesterday I read an article by Dominic Pino in the National Review, and he talks about the Heritage Foundation president, Kevin Roberts, who posted on X, quote, "President Trump's reciprocal tariffs are a tool of statecraft that can level the playing field." Now, he goes on to cite, I don't know, maybe 50 references over a span of decades where the Heritage Foundation touted free trade, free trade, free trade, free trade. Now they've fallen in line. And you can just add them to the list. Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Mike Lee, of the people who have just fallen in line. It should be obvious to any thinking human being that these people are grifters. They didn't all of a sudden have a come to Jesus moment on protectionism. They did it because they saw that's where the money is and they don't care to angry the Donald. Cowardice is not a very good characteristic of leaders or media or anybody else for that matter. And it's a good thing that you have people like Mark and I who are here to tell you nothing but the unvarnished truth. And as we covered that yesterday, free trade is a good thing. And conservatives have really sold themselves out in going against it. And I think it's really time that the pro-capitalist crowd pushes back against these folks. Mark, what do you think about this?
Oh, absolutely. It's stunning how the conservatives have changed their narrative just simply to maintain power. Because right now Trump is controlling the story that's going out there, and he's got the power and he's got the popularity, and so they don't want to lose this, and so they're going along with it. It just goes to show you in a cannibalistic spoil system democracy like the type we have here, it encourages the type of leader that's going to go along with what he considers to be the most popular perspective. And to be perfectly frank with you, they've been coming out with some surveys recently that are showing a great deal of unpopularity for the Trump tariffs. So the American people, as Rand suggested long ago, have a greater sense of reality, a more keen sense of reality than the political establishment themselves. So many of them understand that this tariff is a tax against themselves. They understand that it's going to make life a lot more expensive for them, and they're starting to shift their position away from Trump. Now, that's a good thing since these people are populists. They're going to recognize that. Trump is the pragmatist who has no actual guiding principles, is even now at the 11th hour, as they're going to start posting these tariffs today, starting to change his mind about, exactly the kinds of tariffs, or how deep they should go, where they should go, what exemptions there should be. So he's already starting to shift his positions a little bit, probably based on the unpopularity of the tariffs and based on someone in the administration who has common sense and who's saying, look, this is not going to make America more prosperous the way you think it is. no matter how many times they bring up examples of some businesses like Nissan that are going to invest billions of dollars in, retooling factories here in the United States, the labor went somewhere else because it had to. Capital flows to its most efficient uses. We are too rich to have that kind of manufacturing here, and that's difficult for people to understand, but we don't need that kind of manufacturing here anymore. We don't need those kinds of jobs here anymore. Our economy is evolving out of our wealth. And so that's why the capital shifted to other places that have only human beings as capital, where the labor is a lot more cheap. That's ugly for people to understand. People that don't understand that getting out of poverty is sort of a not pretty thing, So they think that people working for these what we would consider terrible wages in Central or South America or in Asia is an awful human injustice and a crime against humanity, when in fact they're making several times more than the average person in the state that they live. They have an opportunity for the first time to become economically mobile, and those wages will not remain the same forever in the same way they didn't in America. There's a great book about the necessity of sweatshops in the growth. It's a terrible title because we all are all sort of viscerally unattracted to the concept of sweatshops.
Mark, this might go viral. Someone's going to take this clip and it's going to be out there. Mark Pellegrino comes out in favor of sweatshops.
I come out in favor of allowing people to expand their lives economically. And unfortunately, that means that they work in conditions that we would not, because we're too rich. But
Exactly.
we had to at one time. And certainly when you try to explain this stuff to people, they want the Pollyanna. They want you to go from point A to point Z without all the middle conditions that you have to satisfy before you get there. It's an unfortunate fact that getting out of poverty is not a pretty thing, but you have to go through those stages in order to get out of poverty. And so I think the Republicans are going to start modifying things and changing their tune a little bit. But you're right. There's a monolithic cultish attraction to the Trumpster, to the Don, as they call him, that's making the Republican Party very much like the Democratic Party mostly is, a party of personality and a cult of personality, and totally unprincipled.
The thing with the tariffs and the protectionism, yes, it's bad economically, right? But I think that we really need to hammer it home that it's a serious violation of individual rights. People want to trade. They want to trade with people in other countries. And when you step in and put a tax on the goods coming in, you're initiating force against, in this case, when it's a tariff, it's actually against the importing country, despite what Don says. But even if it weren't, even if it were against somebody from another country, it's still an unjustified use of force. But even beyond that, Mark, it seems that I don't know, punditocracy, the punditry, the talking heads have all fallen in line with Trump. And I'm just wondering, I'm hoping that we can prove the thesis wrong, that you have to sell out your principles to have a successful show or to just be successful in the political arena. I'm really hoping that there's people out there that want to hear a principled message from people that aren't going to just tell them what they want to hear. And by the way, we have the chat on the side here. I'm hoping when people disagree with us, they tell us. You know what I mean? I want to know. I could be wrong. Convince me. But I do not want people in my life just telling me what they think I want to hear. I actually had a discussion with my girlfriend's mother the other day about this very topic, and she told me, you're just too blunt. You tell people what you're thinking all the time, and you don't need to do that. If somebody asks you if they look good, manners is, you just tell them, yes, you look nice. And my response was, well, first of all, if somebody's asking me a dishonest question because they just want me to tell them what they want to hear, then they're the one without the manners, not me, right? But secondly, the fact that I'm honest and telling people what they want to hear, I told her, now your daughter knows that I'm not lying to her, that I'm not going to cheat on her, that when I tell her I'm somewhere, that's where I am. That's more important to me than any short-term gain that I can make by being dishonest, or any, potential saving somebody the I don't know, that having their feelings hurt when they've asked a dishonest question. Can you elaborate on that, Mark? Because I know you're a big guy you're a big guy. Yes, I'm looking at your muscles, but no, you're big on people being straightforward.
Well, look, honesty and integrity are two of the two high virtues of objectivism, and there's a reason for that. Most objectivist virtues are relationships to reality, right? And you want your relationship to reality to be as clean, as clear as possible, so that you can thrive. When you have the right information coming in and you're assessing it properly, you stand a better chance of being a successful human being. And that doesn't necessarily mean materially successful, but it certainly means on a non-material level, as a spiritual, as the spiritual beings that we are. Honesty is your connection to reality, and integrity is your connection to principles, the sum of all the knowledge that you know, and your commitment to what you think is true, until you are shown otherwise. And you said one time something that I thought was quite profound, that you can't even allow yourself one lie. And I think that's very, 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 very important. I mean, not only are you destroying your connection with reality, and you're distorting it, you're evading it in a way that's harmful to yourself, because you're evading reality. Um, you reputationally, a person who only moderately practices integrity is an untrustworthy person at all. A person whose integrity can be broken because they need to be polite is not a person who can be trusted under any circumstances. But the person, you can be a morally perfect person in the sense that you can be morally incorruptible. You can have total integrity, which means you don't have to lie because somebody wants to hear something. That's the worst thing you could do for them. It's the worst thing you can do for yourself. It's other centered, it's second-handed, it's getting your sense of self-esteem and judgment of your own worth based on another person's judgment of you as opposed to your judgment of reality. And it's doing the same thing for them. It's feeding this second-handed cycle that I think is terribly damaging to us as human beings. It's a cycle that has gotten us where we are now. Believe it or not, all of this sort of integrates into $37 trillion in debt, and populism
It
and
does.
nationalism. It's all related. Once you boil it down to the basic moral elements involved here, you'll find that once we can take out those toxic, malignant moral elements, the rest will start to fall into place as honesty and integrity integrate into society as virtues that you should stand by 100% of the time.
Mark, I want to tell you a funny story. It's not really relevant to the topic at hand, but I want to tell you about my morning. Okay.
All right.
So yesterday I told everybody that I was going to fix the issue about the signal coming in and out. Now, the way StreamYard says to do that is to plug directly into the internet rather than relying on Wi-Fi. I don't know the first damn thing about any of this stuff. So I go to my buddy that I live with and I said, hey, listen, can you connect me here to the internet? And he says, sure. So he spends a good hour and a half, jimmying up a wire. He's got the snips. He's connecting the plugs, doing this and that. And then he just figures out that there's actually no Ethernet, which I never heard of till yesterday. Well, actually about a week ago. There's no Ethernet connection on my computer, so he can't do anything with what he's got. So I said, okay. So then he looked it up, and it turns out there's this little adapter that I can use that I can plug into my computer that will give me an Ethernet connection. But then it turns out the thing he has here in the office is actually a Wi-Fi extender. It's not the router, and the cord I had isn't long enough to reach the router. So now I go out this morning, and I go to Best Buy. Best Buy's closed. Then I say, oh, geez, I Google it and I go to Target. Target has what I need. So I get the adapter. I got a 50-foot cord. I come home. I hook it up to the computer. I plug it into the router. And I got bupkis. It tells me, no, you have no connection. I spent a good 20 minutes trying to figure it out. couldn't do it. So I ended up just plugging in to the Wi-Fi extender. It seems to be working. I'm not coming in and out, but I guess that's what happens when you spend 25 years away while technology is developing, because I really know next to nothing about technology.
Well, you have an excuse. You spent 25 years locked away while technology was developing. I didn't, and I still don't know how to do any of the stuff that you described. So people call me a boomer for that, even though I'm not a boomer. My birthday's coming up, but I did miss the boomer era. Sorry, I'm a I'm a Gen Xer, I think.
Come on, you're not a Gen Xer.
No, Gen, and what do you call it?
I'm a Gen Xer.
No, no. What's the next thing over boomer?
You're a boomer. It goes boomer
I'm not
Gen
a
X.
boomer. I'm Gen X, 65.
Are you? I think that you're mistaken here, Mark.
No, 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 no. I think we have a dispute that can be settled easily. I think I can't say that what my wife's age is, but boomer is somewhere up to the threshold is like 63. I think.
I'm going to find this out right now. And if you are right, I will gladly admit it.
I think we need something more spicy than that.
Wow.
Okay, go ahead.
When were you born?
65, baby.
That's the first year of Gen X. You've just made it. You
All
are
right.
you're boomer adjacent.
I'm boomer adjacent, but I'm boomerish technology wise, but boomer adjacent in other respects. Yes, I made the cutoff, man. I'm Gen X.
All right. So you sent me two articles, so we can get into those now. Why don't you start with whichever one you want and tell
Yeah,
us
yeah.
about it?
Oh yeah, okay. I'm gonna have to do it from memory because I'm on my phone because my computer was dead because I'm a boomer technologically. So that's why you see the difference in our profiles here. So yeah, the first article I like to deal with is the cultural one because I think it's super super important. Biologically male athletes in female sports has been a particular bugaboo of the right. And at the moment, Maine has refused to bow to the pressure of the federal government to remove biological males from female sports. And so you might have to call up the article, but there might be some kind of lawsuit or some action that the federal government is taking against the state. Oh, the state that they are going to withdraw federal funds
Yes.
from the state of Maine because they refuse to comply with the federal mandate that biological males should not play in female sports. Now, when you're a capitalist like we are and an individualist like we are and believe in total and complete freedom as we do, you can often have a couple of positions on something. A personal position, which highlights your sense of whether or not the fact itself is appropriate. And then a position with respect to what the politics should be surrounding that. Now, do I think biological males should be in female sports? Absolutely not. I think one of the perfect measures of the difference between males and females, biologically speaking, or testimonies, quiet testimonies to the difference in biological males and females is in the fact that no trans males are going over into male sports and attempting to invade that territory. I think because they absolutely know that they're going to get crushed in a most unpleasant way, and so the biological males are sort of monopolizing this infringement on the world of women. Yeah, yeah. Do I believe that trans people exist? Yes, I do. But they are not biological men and they are not biological women. They are trans men and trans women, which is a different category to me. Now, that aside, do I think that the government should be funding the state of Maine? Absolutely not, under no circumstances. So this serves as a sort of pretense to get the federal funding out of the states, which the states have become utterly and totally dependent on since Roosevelt. That was Roosevelt's intention to propagate the New Deal by political patronage and making the states increasingly dependent upon the federal government. And that's what this has turned into. So, no, the federal government should not be funding the state of Maine under any circumstances whatsoever, for any reason whatsoever. But for this, Look, I believe private institutions have a right to set the rules that they think are appropriate. I may fundamentally disagree with them. May find them fundamentally irrational, but all of these conflicts are taking place because it's in the public sphere as opposed to the private sphere. 99.9% of these conflicts wouldn't be happening if it were private enterprises, private entities that can set rules, so provided they're not violating anybody's rights, and provided everybody could go there voluntarily and know the rules beforehand. All of these conflicts are an attempt of one party to leverage another party to gain control over a public sphere. We need to eliminate that completely, and that eliminates 99.9% of these conflicts. What say you to the whole thing? I said a lot.
Well, you kind of don't need me because you gave the rant that I had prepared in my head. So maybe
Okay.
we just move on. No, I do have something to say actually, and we of course have the great Jim Valiant in the audience, and he can tell me whether I'm correct on this or not. But per the 10th Amendment, any powers not enumerated to the federal government are reserved to the states. There's nothing in the federal constitution that gives the federal government power or any say over education. So constitutionally, even though I would prefer all education be private, constitutionally, states would be in charge of how they want to run their own education systems. This, of course, gets complicated because the states go crying to the federal government, they need funding, and then the federal government uses that funding to manipulate the states. The whole thing needs to stop. The federal government needs to get out of education as quickly as can be done without causing damage, because they're so involved, and if you just rip them out now, you're going to have people that are harmed by it through no fault of their own. But you're so right, Mark. When it comes to how it's government that causes these problems, because if parents weren't forced to send their kids to these public schools, you wouldn't have an issue. If I didn't want my kid to go to that school, I'd just send him somewhere else or send her somewhere else. And that's it. If they were all private, then they would compete, and they would find out real quickly that most parents of girls don't want their daughters competing with boys, so they wouldn't sign them up for schools and organizations that were allowing boys to play. It's a similar dynamic with the people who want religion in schools and the people who don't want religion in schools. They're all being compelled to pay for education. So, of course, they want their kids being taught what they want. If you get the government out, then they can send their kid to whatever school they want. They can teach them, Hare Krishna, or Jesus is your savior, whatever you want. You could have the, Ayn Rand school of personal responsibility, whatever the hell you want. And the market would sort it out and people can send them wherever they wish. Of course, now we don't have that, which is why we end up with these problems over and over again about what kind of religion can be taught. Can kids pray in school? What books can be had in school? Get the government out. As usual, that's the solution. And by the way, as usual, when the government's involved, it's a two-pronged attack, because you first have the massive rights violation of forcing people into schools and forcing them to pay for schools. But you also have the economic insufficiency inefficiency, that ultimately drives our education into the toilet.
Yeah, and that economic inefficiency leads to lack of innovation. I mean, it's one of the least innovated areas of our economic world. When look, now I can learn a language by an app. I don't have to take an expensive foreign language course in college. I don't even have to go directly to the college to study there. I could take if I wanted to learn about literature, I could take great books. Some of the greatest professors in almost any university has created courses that for a song I could purchase. And if I wanted to learn about Russian literature, just focus on Russian literature with a great professor tutoring me through it, and I could learn about Russian literature. Schools would innovate in a way that we can't even envision now. We couldn't even imagine now. And we have this notion that schools are places where kids need to be socialized. Kids don't need to be socialized. They don't. If anything, they're some of the homeschooled kids that I know are some of the most well-adjusted children I know. They get socialized just by living in the world. They don't have to. School isn't a primary place of socialization. It's certainly a place where they're learning conformist ideas and learning that they have to, sit in a pack of concepts and they can't question for peer pressure. But look, learning is a very individual process, and it can be so much cheaper with innovation coming in. People are fear corporations buying schools, but they could train people for all manner of skills that would be quite useful for kids in their future, as opposed to somebody getting a degree in black studies that puts them $120,000 in debt and then has them working as a barista at Starbucks because there's absolutely no real purpose other than academia for that kind of work. So look, it stifles innovation, and I think a free and unfettered market in schooling would not necessarily look like the brick and mortar situation we have today. It would make education far more accessible to people. Even Ivy League education would be far more accessible to people.
We have a question here in the chat. That's a good one. It's, should getting one's child an education be mandated to parents by the government? Could it be argued that depriving a child of education is a violation of their rights? Hey, don't walk away because it's a tough question.
I'm only grabbing my geriatric dog because he's walking in circles.
Oh, he's doing some wandering?
He's wandering.
Boomer owner geriatric dog.
Yes.
So this is, I think, a good question, actually, and it's not an easy one to answer, because the problem I have is I do think that if you bring children in this world, you have an obligation to raise them correctly, to not abuse them. And if you just deprive a child from any learning, I think that is abuse. On the other hand, I'm very loath to allow the government to mandate it, because then the government has to go around inspecting. What are they going to do? Go to each house and give tests to the kids, and then the government is going to be the ones to determine the standards. So I'm going to say, unless there's evidence of actual abuse where a child's mind is being destroyed, I don't like the idea of the government mandating education, but I do think that there's an argument that can be made for it.
Look, we have government mandated education now, and I think there's not a single student in Maryland who can read at grade level or do math at grade level. They're coming out, they're graduating in such a way that protects the reputations of the teachers' unions, but does not. They're not abiding by their fiduciary responsibility to their students to turn them into thinking individuals who are capable of dealing with life and navigating the problems of life and living as thriving human beings. They're just not doing that. I certainly think, abuse, that not educating your child would be a form of abuse. You're not preparing them as a parent should. Their moral obligation to their child is to prepare them for adulthood, to prepare them to be independent thinking adults who can thrive and live in the world. Part of that is education. What that looks like, it could be completely individual. There are those who do not fit with a typical school academic curriculum, and who would be better at learning trades, not being illiterate, but because they would have to learn how to function in the world, but who don't need to learn the classics of history. They don't need to learn.
Go with Homer. We'll go with Homer on
They
this.
don't need to know. They don't need to know Homer, even though Homer's great. What they're proficient at is computers and fixing mechanical things, and well, they should be allowed to train in that. If that's what their talent is, let them explore their talent. And the fact that they're deficient in Homer doesn't make them deficient in life. They can become quite wealthy. I don't know if Rockefeller knew Homer, but he certainly knew how the petroleum industry. And I don't know if Vanderbilt knew Homer, but he certainly knew the steamboat industry and then railroads and steel. Look, I mean, and look, I remember Theodore Roosevelt, who's one of the worst presidents of all time. Uh, he chased J.J. Hill with antitrust for years and years and years and years and years. And one of the comments he made about this great railroad magnate who literally created the trade in the Pacific Northwest and trade with Asia,
The
who
only one without government help, too,
no government help.
and did it most efficiently.
He
Had
did
the
the
best
North. He
railroads.
did the Great Northern with no government help, no displacement of peoples, none of the stuff that were typical of the subsidized railways. So he was the person. He was the last person on the planet that should have been pursued by Theodore Roosevelt as a quote unquote monopolist, terrorizer of the economy. He was a great man, but one of the things Roosevelt commented on about him was that he was not intelligent, i.e., he hadn't read all the books that Theodore Roosevelt had read, but he was certainly far more successful than Theodore Roosevelt ever was, because Theodore Roosevelt couldn't get a business off the ground to save his life, but he could certainly quote from Homer. So I'll take James Jerome Hill over a Theodore Roosevelt any day of the week, despite his lack of book learning. He changed the world in a fundamental way that made my life better and your life better.
There's actually a very good book, though, by Theodore Roosevelt, a biography of Gouverneur Morris. I'd recommend it to anybody. I think it's available in the Nuremberg Library. I think that's what it's called, the Nuremberg Library. Anyway, it's interesting that you brought up how not everybody's equipped to do the same thing. I am mechanically disinclined to the umpteenth degree, right? I actually have a learning disability. When you take IQ tests as a kid, when it came to mechanical application IQ, or what they call performance IQ, I was, I think, 81 or something. When it came to verbal IQ, I was up around 130. Now, if I had been forced, well, I didn't go to school anyway, but hypothetically, to force me to try to learn automotive stuff or shop, it's just not going to happen. It doesn't matter how much I try. So I agree with you. And then the very interesting thing about this is I sent out a email request to Howard Gardner to come on my podcast, and he declined. He said he's too busy, but he is one of the innovators in the idea that there are multiple kinds of intelligence. So I just found it interesting that you brought it up.
Oh,
Robert
absolutely.
Nasir.
I mean, in my own life, I was great at algebra, trigonometry, chemistry. I could do all that stuff, but physics and spatial stuff, geometry, I had real issues with, and as a result, my mechanical prowess is about probably I would say around the 60 level. So I'm getting down. I'm getting down into what they call idiot level, but I have a high proficiency in other ways. You can have also a high moral intelligence. There's various types of intelligence where your IQ can be very, very high, and why not let people explore worlds and educations where their IQs are high and where they can actually benefit themselves in the world.
Greg Lewis corrected me, and thank goodness he did. It's the Gutenberg Library, not the Nuremberg Library.
I was going to say, okay, go ahead.
Robert Nasir asked a question. He said, would Ayn Rand have written, there is no conflicts of interest among men, neither in business nor in trade nor in their most personal desires, if she'd known that Liebowitz and Pellegrino's The Capitalist Corner would overlap ARC UK's The Daily Objective? Yes, she absolutely would have written that, Robert, because what she would have said is that the struggle, the competition is in the interest of both. And that brings out the best in people. If you don't have the best show, if you can't do it, then you deserve to be beaten in the ratings. And hopefully we can beat my buddy Rozzy in the ratings. It doesn't mean I don't like him. He's a great guy, but this is the best time for us to do the show. Hopefully, he views it the same way as I do.
Yeah, I love you, Rozzy, but this is the time that we have to do the show.
So, you had another story as well, Mark, that you sent to me. Both,
Yeah,
I think, were from the Epoch Times. And what was the other one?
yeah. So the Epoch Times, just for anybody out there, is it is a conservative journal. I think it's actually run by Chinese dissidents because they certainly focus a great deal on the China issues and the problems with the communist Chinese. And the Falun Gong group that's being persecuted over there in China and the Uyghur Muslims and stuff. It's not an inordinate amount of time, but it's enough to give me the sense that that's where their base is. But they are a fairly honest news outlet, so I do like them, even though they tend to be conservative. I like their perspective, so I subscribe to them. And this one was about somewhere in the neighborhood of 24 states are suing the federal government for the House of Human Services, Health and Human Services Department, for denying them coronavirus 19 funding. So apparently, somewhere between 11 and 13 billion dollars is now being shut off. The spigot to these 24 states has been shut off, and they are claiming that the government hasn't gone through the proper procedures to be able to cut this stuff off. That the aid was part of a 1.2 trillion dollar package that had more uses than just the coronavirus, and that the states have now become dependent upon this, and they're suing to get this to get refunded. Now, of course, I think the entire loan package, the 1.3 or 1.6 trillion dollar loan package, was a terrible injustice to all of us. Shutting down the economy was a terrible injustice to all of us. When people say that the coronavirus killed this restaurant or that restaurant, it wasn't the virus that killed anything. It was the political reaction to the virus and the political insanity, and then the cultural insanity that went along with the spread of this virus that caused literally the almost seemingly irreversible economic impacts that we're experiencing today, and perhaps the great state dependency on these federal funds in order for them to get by in other areas. I agree that the Health and Human Services should cut off this $13 billion. Absolutely. It's time to cut off the spigot to the states. The states should be independent of the federal government. We have to stop this patronage program. And the loan should have never been made in the first place. The cutoff should have never happened in the first place. I don't believe vaccines should have been mandated in the first place. The whole concept is corrupt from beginning to end, and is, of course, has launched and promoted a whole host of conspiracy theories with respect to the government. People want to give government more credit than they're due. It's just plain old incompetence and idiocy. And then the contagion of incompetence and idiocy that makes these things happen. And then they promote conspiracy theories because they think the government that somehow can't pay its own bills is somehow all powerful and injecting us with genetic therapy that'll somehow, I don't know, morph us into zombies in the next 10 years. Anyway, what say you about this, about Health and Human Services cutting off this
Well,
big?
I like your point there about people giving government way too much credit, because I remember when I was incarcerated during the entire COVID regime, and the inmates would say things like, "Oh, the staff are deliberately trying to infect us with COVID because they were so incompetent in what they did." And my answer was, if they were trying to do it, they wouldn't be doing this good of a job, right? Like, these people can't even remember the rec schedule. Like, they are not coming up with this grand plan to infect us. Government is incompetent. So I am in a unique spot. I think you may be as well. I absolutely believe that coronavirus was a dangerous virus. Maybe not as dangerous as we were being told, but certainly more dangerous than the yearly flu. Believe that the vaccine is a good thing. I don't think it's killing people. I don't think people are dropping dead of myocarditis everywhere you go. But at the same time, I was totally opposed to the lockdowns, totally opposed to government funding the states, handing out money, that sort of thing, and totally opposed to government funding the vaccine. And it's like you said, had the government not done all those things, we probably would not have ended up with the degree of the conspiracy theories that we ended up with. That, the virus was intentionally created to, I've read it was intentionally created to cost Donald Trump the election. I mean, I had a girl say to me,
Really?
like, basically she told me that I was going to die within the year or some such thing because I was vaccinated. She says, yeah, when they turn these things on, you're going to die.
Oh,
Um,
the nanobots that are
Whatever they've
inside.
injected me
Yeah.
with, I don't know.
Oh
Who the hell?
shit!
Who knows?
I've been injected 5 times. Does that
Yeah,
mean I'm going to get 5 times the fun of you? Or
yeah, yeah. Yes, you are. So I think that I think they should stop funding the states. I think the states are being ridiculous by saying they still need COVID money. I think they never should have done it to begin with. But the whole point to this, to me, is it's what happens when you have an unprincipled approach, right? Once you set the principle that the government should fund these things, whether it be the education that we talked about before, whether it be protecting businesses by means of tariffs, whether it be funding states so they can implement COVID policies, put down lockdowns, whatever. Once you give the government this authority, it becomes entrenched and people assume that that's what the government should be doing. There's no principled approach. It's not like the Trump administration, for instance, came out and said, public state education should not be funded by the federal government at all. What he said was, I'm going to take funding away if you don't cater to my wishes, right?
Mhm.
In this case here, it's not like they're saying states should not be funded for their coronavirus responses by the federal government. They're saying, no, it's been long enough. We're going to take it back. There's no principled approach. It's just base pragmatism. In most cases, it's just political expediency.
In fact, yeah. In fact, they agree with the premise. Oh, yes, we should be funding and helping you based on our altruist ideals, but we just don't. It's just not practical at this point because this was set for a particular kind of issue, and that issue is no longer here anymore. So, if there's anything that unites all of this insanity, besides the whims and wishes of Donald Trump, it's that it's that the government should, in principle, affect outcomes, should in principle help people, quote unquote, assist them, but they just don't do it efficiently enough or effectively enough. So we're going to try to trim the fat a little bit so that they can do what we think they should do a little bit better. No, the government is the only assistance the government should give is assistance in protecting innocent people from initiated force and violence and fraud. That's the assistance that they should give. That's what we've delegated to them. That's the only powers that we have delegated to them. Um, what were you going to say? Oh, I
Uh,
wanted to say something about the vaccine too, because I don't want to give people the impression that I'm anti-vax because I was against the compulsory vaccination orders from various states, which I just thought was insane. I am pro-vax. I think the mRNA technology is way ahead of its time and a very innovative form of technology that's, of course, in its primitive stages. I do think it has caused health issues. My own doctor has recommended, and she's not a conspiracy theorist, she's not a right winger, she's not a Trumper, she's one of the best cardiologists in the state of California, probably in the entire country. She recommended that I not take any more vaccines because of the correlation between the vaccine and heart arrhythmia, which was my issue before. So the myocarditis, neurological issues. I know a kid who started getting neurological issues after the vaccine, arrhythmia and sometimes severe arrhythmia are associated side effects with this. They're real and they need to be investigated more. So I don't think people should just be taking them. Also, the doctor that gave me my physical for the show that I'm doing now got blood clots in her lungs as a result of as a result of the vaccine, and can't take the vaccine either. And the blood clots cannot be they haven't been broken down. There's no medications that she's taken that have been able to break down the pulmonary embolisms in her. So there are serious side effects, and more testing I think needs to be done with our mRNA technology, because it is, I think, the key to curing many diseases down the road. It just has some unforeseen consequences at the moment.
I happen to agree that, first of all medications, all treatments have potential side effects,
Yeah.
right? So that it doesn't surprise me when there are. I just think that they've been greatly overblown by the conspiracy crowd that thinks that, they're just going to set these things off or people are dropping dead. I think by and large they are a net positive. But like I said, every medication comes with their risks, regardless. I have cough drops over here. I'm sure they've got potential side effects. Now, what I wanted to say before, Mark, and you touched on this yesterday, was what fuels much of the government's ability to spend on all of these projects and programs is it's not so much printing of money any longer, but expanding the money supply. And next to me over here, I've got Murray Rothbard, What Has Government Done to Our Money? Benjamin Anderson, Economics and the Public Welfare, Rothbard's History of Banking, and then I got Milton Friedman's Monetary History of the United States, and downstairs I got Theory of Money and Credit, and Mises. So I maybe just touch on that for a few minutes. The insidiousness of a government that primes the pump in terms of money. And also keep in mind, folks, that the Trumpster is a big fan of low interest rates, which means injecting the economy with cash.
Well, in his first administration, he wanted the Fed to go negative interest rates. So he wanted to stoke the economy even more. And what that means, that means easy money, easy credit. So you have the the sense that the demand is stimulated because now people can take all kinds of risks because there's no real world bars like interest rates to them investing in or spending and whatever they want. In fact, with negative interest rates, you're not encouraged to save. Savings used to be what funded production. You funded production through savings as opposed to simply doling out loans or increasing the money supply so that money is cheap and people can um, people can acquire loans more cheaply. So it has a couple of pronged effects. I mean, it robs the saver of the capacity to save. It robs him of his savings literally, so that the value of the money that he has in the bank is not its actual value from day to day. It goes down. It discourages them from saving, and encourages a moment by moment type of economy where the consumer has to spend today because tomorrow the dollar will be worth less than it is worth today. And so encourages a kind of it's a sort of depravity of the mind with respect to your own well-being and spending. Um, and you go on and you can elaborate even further on the corruptions of expanding the money supply and what it does to the economy and to the human psyche and to the world.
Well, it ultimately sends false signals. When businessmen see that the interest rate's low, they assume people are saving, which means time preference has dropped and people are looking to spend in the future rather than the immediate present. So then businesses invest in capital intensive businesses in projects for future consumption, except for the demand is for now, not for later, and they end up producing things that nobody wants, and we end up with the business cycle that we're all too familiar with. I'd highly recommend and anybody out there to read on this subject. You can read Alan Greenspan's essay on the gold standard. I think is phenomenal. Or the Austrian Theory of the Trade Cycle. I believe it's edited by Richard Ebeling, but it might be Roger Garrison. I'm not sure. Murray Rothbard's "What Has the Government Done to Our Money" is also very good. I highly recommend that people familiarize themselves, even if just a little bit, with monetary policy, with what the government has done to the economy and done to our money.
I think that's an excellent Misesian definition about the time preference thing and what that and the false signals that it sends people. But talk about I think we have to talk about the psychological and moral elements as well, because I think our party is a moral party. It's dependent upon moral principles, and that kind of false signaling that gives people it produces something in them, I think, epistemologically and also morally. It produces a particular kind of moral culture as well. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think this the
I'm gonna have
spend
to wing
now.
it. I'm gonna wing it, but I haven't really thought much about the moral implications
Well,
of
just
in the
because I
terms that
think
you said it. But I do think this, right? When or when people are uncertain about their savings, right? Ultimately your savings represents your future. And when a person becomes uncertain about their future to that degree, when they can't count on the money they're putting away being worth anything, because by the time they take it out of the bank, prices are much higher. Or, when the first businesses that get the money that's injected into the economy are basically given a handout from the
yeah.
government, they get to go, they spend at the old prices with, free money basically. And then by the time that circulates around to everybody else, now the prices are up. And that is, I think, utterly demoralizing. It, on one hand, gives businesses a overly sense of optimism. Drives them to think that there's this never-ending success as far as the eye can see, but it also plants in the minds of regular people that they're just getting ripped off. And because of its effect on the business cycle, it really robs capitalism of its good reputation, because people attribute that to capitalism. They don't attribute it to the government manipulation. They think that it's intrinsic to the capitalist system, which it really is not.
Right, and that's demoralizing. I also think that when you're not encouraged to save, when interest rates don't reflect what's really going on with the world, when they don't reflect actual production, when they don't reflect actual amount of money in the system, when they're just a fiat number that somebody's making up to stimulate demand, I think it creates a how would Rand say it, that a perceptual level kind of life, because you can only live in this moment. You have to spend everything now. You're not planning for a future, because the future is something that you can't. It's so unpredictable, given the boom bust cycle, and given the lowering the fact that money is losing value every minute. You have to live literally for the moment, and I think that does stuff to you epistemologically and morally. As a human being, you have to forecast your life. You have to live in the present moment, but you also have to view the future and live with an eye towards the future. We're the only beings on the planet that can do that kind of thing. And this kind of monetization that we're seeing now compels people to do the exact opposite, to stay exactly in the present moment without regard for the future. And I think that's an anti-human way of living. I think it breeds depravity and immorality in people.
I think the word you were looking for is the concrete bound mentality.
Concrete bound, that's good.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that your point there actually is a great place to bring me to what I prepared for today's capitalist thought of the day.
Oh, good.
And that is that in order for life to be successful requires purpose and effort. We have to set a goal, and it can't be, I'm going to pick up this cup. It's a long range goal that we dedicate our lives to, and we have to be willing to put forth the requisite effort to achieve it. And all things remaining equal. Now, obviously, there's unforeseen events that can happen. A tornado hits you, whatever. But all things remaining equal, the level of success that you're going to reach in life is going to be commensurate to the purpose that you set and the degree of effort that you're willing to put forth to achieve it.
Can I just piggyback on that for a
That's
second
the
with the
point. Yeah, that's what
with
I
the
want to do.
jujitsu a
Yeah,
jujitsu story? Okay,
yeah.
first of all, from my great teacher Jean-Jacques Machado, who is a legendary Hall of Fame jujitsu guy, old school jujitsu guy. When he was a purple belt in Brazil, the great Rickson Gracie, who is the unsung hero of the Gracie family, he's the true warrior of the Gracie family. Now, Preuss and Horian are the salesmen, and Henner, the salesman of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu dynasty. Rickson is the true warrior and the true master of Jiu-Jitsu. He just gave my teacher his eighth degree last week. So my teacher's what they call a coral belt, which is one rank below red belt, which is the highest possible. So you get ninth degree, which is the highest possible. You become a red belt. Rickson is a red belt, even though he refuses to wear his red belt. Anyway, the point is, he saw talent in Jean Jacques when he was a purple belt and said, "I want you to train with me." Jean Jacques said yes. And the very next day, took two buses at 6 o'clock, and at 6:30 in the morning was right in front of Hickson's studio, waiting to be taught. And he did this every single day for 6 years. He trained with arguably the greatest jujitsu master of all time because he had that purpose and that intention. And I look at him now, a man with a physical disability, right? He has a deformed hand, who is one of the greatest jujitsu practitioners of all time. In his 50s, young MMA artists, young MMA champions come in there and do jujitsu with him, and they can't do anything to him. He can submit them easily. It's like an episode of Kung Fu. It's so amazing to watch, and I've experienced rolling with him too. It's like you're rolling with a phenomenon, not a human being, and all of that came from his will and his drive, which he preaches to us on a daily basis. He came to this country not speaking any English. He became fluent in English. He started in a garage somewhere in Malibu, and now he's got these academies that have spread across the world, and deservedly so, because he had the vision. He had the vision and the will to make it happen. That's hard, folks. It's hard because you go through periods of drought. You go through periods of self-doubt. You go through periods where people aren't receptive to you. You go through the periods where you're down. But what defines you is not being down, but when you're up. That one of the things I love about Viktor Frankl is how he never liked to define himself by his low points, but always by his high points, because that was his potential. That was what he was capable of. And that was one of the most inspiring messages in his man's search for meaning, and his ability to survive Auschwitz and to come out the other side of that. You define yourself by your highest possible. That's a great thing, folks. It's not pressurized. It's not something that will crush you. It's something that will make you stronger and better. I feel like I'm better than at 60 than I was at 20. In so many ways, and just come from the integration of philosophy and taking a moral code seriously. Something I didn't know in my 20s, something I didn't even really know in my 30s, even though I had objectivism. That how important it is to integrate a moral code into your life and then practice it with integrity. You'll be surprised at what that does to your own self-esteem, and what that does to your own sense of well-being in the world and your capacity to navigate the world. It's immeasurably awesome.
And that was awesome, Mark. All right, take us out.
All right, folks. Well, this has been episode 3 of Capitalist Corner. So you got to join us tomorrow, same bat time, same bat place. Michael's going to be here hosting. I'm going to be on my way to Atlanta doing some work, but I'll be back for Friday's episode. But don't miss it, because Michael's a great articulate spokesman for capitalism. I think even better than I. Watch him on The Rational Egoist, and tune in. Bring us your questions. We want to be challenged. Nothing makes us stronger than challenge. And we will see you tomorrow.
Goodbye.
Bye.